here. Okay. Hope everybody had a good day today. Stayed nice and dry. Didn't look like we got very much rain today, but hey, you know, it is what it is. So, we are tonight's GoToMeeting schedule. I just want to kind of go over the announcements really quickly. We've got no meeting tomorrow or next week because of spring break. So enjoy that, everybody. Enjoy that well-deserved break that we all definitely need. On April 7th, I don't know if that's the right date, but the Wednesday we get back from spring break, which is actually April 4th, so that is wrong. I will change that right now. We are going to have somebody from Cisco present to us. Actually, it is going to be Joy Richardson's father, who works for Cisco. He is a salesperson for Cisco, and he is going to discuss with us what he does and how he got there and his kind of background a little bit. So be ready for that, okay? April 6th, we have our Bluegrass Festival at school at lunch. Remember that when you guys were 8th graders, everybody was so excited to come to the South High campus and they had that hot little $20 bill in their hand. Well, we are going to be selling Sunny D, and I know that sounds weird to be selling, but it goes like hotcakes. So please, there are 13 teams. Each team is responsible for bringing me a Costco-sized case of it so that we can sell it to all those suckers of 8th graders and or the suckers that are in my classroom. April 19th, we have our fundraiser at Delicious. Go get some yummy ice cream, bring your friends, and just enjoy, and we will earn some money to bring back to our club, which will hopefully offset the patches that we will be purchasing for you guys for this year. The second to last thing, April 25th, the images that you guys are creating, you need to turn those in, please, to the Dropbox. I will put, or the Google Drive folder. I will be putting a folder there for you because on May 25th, you will be excused from 4th, 5th, 6th period classes to go ahead and play those images. I got that approved from Dr. McDowell today, and he had said that that is a great opportunity for us to practice those and do that. That is on the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, so keep that in mind, please, when you are scheduling your plans. Just delay those a couple hours because you don't want to worry about traffic anyway. So just go ahead and leave a little bit later for wherever you're going to be spending your Lake Havasu, blah, blah, blah. So go for it. Before I get into our guest speaker this evening, Mr. Bush has a quick short update on the internships at Northrop Grumman that I know some of you are very, very interested in. So Mr. Bush, take it away.
Okay, well, I have some not so good news and then maybe some positive news. We'll see. For this year, we have one returning cyber patriot that went last year, and that is Melina. The budget for the cyber patriots in the organization where Melina went, my organization, was reduced this year. So we could only take returning cyber patriots. I also heard that not as a cyber patriot, but Matt, why am I forgetting his name, is going to be there too. Help me, Mrs. Wood, when you think of his name. But anyway, the other part of it, though, is Mrs. Wood showed that there was a thing on, there was a posting for Northrop Grumman about cyber patriots internships. There is another part of the organization, NGAS, that is still hiring cyber patriots. So if you find a rec out there on the careers website, you can still apply for it. It'll be a little bit different setup than we did last year, except in our organization, but I encourage you to apply for it if you can. That's pretty much it for now.
Okay. Matt Crane was his name. Um, Bummer
Thank
about
you.
that as far as the internships go, but yes, there is that opportunity, so please apply. I am also on the committee for selecting the people to look through the Boeing internships, so props to those of you that sent that out. So yeah, good thing. Okay, so let's get started. We've got about 25 of you out there now, so good for us on being on time ish. Way to be on time ish. So, what we're going to cover today is we actually, as I said before, we have a guest speaker with us tonight. Who I don't know, Carrie, if you're on or not. If you're
I'm here.
you're here. Okay, great. This is
Yes. Uh-huh.
Professor Carrie Natchenberg, who has very graciously allowed us some time with him this evening. He is a UCLA professor in their computer science department. He has a master's and a bachelor's in computer science from UCLA. And we kind of snuck in there with him because Bill Patterson is a student in the computer science department at UCLA and is hoping and praying to take his class next year. So one of the things that Professor Natchenberg has been able to do, because he has a job with Google Plus, he is able to volunteer his time at UCLA in their computer science department, which is pretty awesome. So we are very grateful that you're here with us, and you guys, I hope you are ready to ask lots of questions and listen well to someone who has been in the computer science field for many years and who is at the cutting edge and leading in the cyber technology and cybersecurity technologies. So sit back, keep your hats on, because I think it's going to be an awesome ride tonight, okay? Professor Natchenberg,
Thanks, Julie.
take over.
Actually, how do I take over the deck? Can you maybe just go to slide 5, or can you give me control?
I am going to go ahead and give you control.
All right. I have never used GoToMeeting before, so we usually use Google Hangouts. There's a plug for that. Oh, it's asking me to download something. Let's try to do that quickly, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Let's see. Hold on one second. I apologize. It says ask me to share my screen, and let's do application window. How about that? And here we go. Share. Oh, okay. So in that case, hold on. Let's see if I can pull the slide presentation up here, and everybody can see that. Can you see that on my screen there?
Chat room, can we see? Yes.
Okay, we can. Good. Okay, and let us hold on one second here. Let's present this 1 second. Let's hide and view slide. Let's see, view, present. There we go. Okay, so I was asked by Bill, I guess William, to come and talk a little bit about what it's like to be in the cybersecurity field and how I started out. And so I'm happy to do that and maybe spend about 5 or 10 minutes on that. And Julie, is that sort of along the lines of what you were interested in talking about to start with?
Yes, please. That would be awesome.
Okay. So let me give you a brief introduction of where I came from and how I started, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how you can get into cybersecurity if you're interested in that field, or more generally in computer science if you're interested in that as well. So I started programming back when I was 11 years old. My father bought me a TI-99 4A computer, which probably none of you ever heard of. This was back in 1982, believe it or not, a long time ago. And at that time, that computer had 16 kilobytes of memory. My current computer, to give you some context, has 1 million times more memory. It has 16 gigabytes. So it's amazing how things have changed. I started programming in BASIC, just on my own. My father taught me a little bit, and I started writing video games. I got my first internship with Norton, Peter Norton Computing, if you've ever heard of Norton Antivirus, back in 1990. and stayed with them through my college career at UCLA from 1990 to 95, where I worked on various things, including building some of their antivirus technology, which I'll tell you about a little bit later if you're interested. And then I started at Symantec full-time in 95 after doing my master's degree. In cybersecurity, it actually is useful to have a master's degree, and I'll talk about that later, because you can do it with a bachelor's degree, but if you really want to get in cybersecurity and have a big impact, having a specialization in that field is actually very useful in getting a master's degree. And most recently, in 2016, I went to Google X. I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but Google X is a division responsible for things like the self-driving car, internet, air balloons, drones, and so on. And back in 2016, it was a secret at the time, but I was hired to do a very stealth cybersecurity project for Google X. That was just announced recently, and they were called Chronicle. And Chronicle is the latest Alphabet company. So Alphabet is the umbrella company over Google, and Waymo, which is our self-driving car company, and Verily, which is our life sciences company, and now we have Chronicle as well, which is a C in Alphabet. And so we're focusing on cybersecurity. So that's where I am right now. It's been about 25 years in the cybersecurity industry. So I probably just bored you with that, but I'll tell you a little bit about how you can get into cybersecurity now. So the first thing that's most important about getting into cybersecurity, if you want to go and stop hackers or build software to secure, home users and corporations, is you have to focus on the basics. The best way to be a great cybersecurity practitioner, to be somebody who's a great anti-hacker, if you will, is to be a great programmer, a great coder, okay? And so if you have the opportunity to study software engineering and computer science in your high school, that's wonderful. I don't know if you offer courses there. I hope you do, given that you're talking to me now. But definitely, when you go to university, enroll in those computer science courses. And becoming fluent in coding and programming is not just about taking courses and doing the projects and the courses and doing the homework. It's about programming all the time. It means on weekends you're programming. It means you're doing side projects. It means you are building your own website. It means you're, building, any, video games, anything that excites you. The best project you can work on is a project that excites you. Don't try to find the perfect project, but code all the time. And again, the best people I know in cybersecurity are people who are just incredible programmers. In addition to that, you have to know your data structures and algorithms. So some of the interesting things that, by the way, Julie, does this group, have they had any computer science? Do they know what I mean by data structures and algorithms, or is that a term I should define?
No, yes, yes, about 85% of them are or have been taken a computer science course, yes.
Great. Okay, so that's great. See, most of you, or almost all of you, know what I'm talking about when I say data structures and algorithms. Basically, when you build security software, it has to be very fast because data is transmitted around the internet at multi-gigabit speeds right now. Computers run, gigahertz, and when, at gigahertz speeds, and people do not want their computers or networks slowed down by security software. I mean, if you ever installed antivirus software which slowed down your computer and you cursed at it because your computer was too slow, you know what I mean? And so a really important thing that you have to learn when you're building cybersecurity software is how to make it extremely fast so the user doesn't even know it's there. Because if the user knows the cybersecurity software is there, they'll just turn it off if it's too slow. So not only do you need to be a good programmer, but you need to know the main data structures and algorithms. And things to learn would be things like hash tables, binary search trees, sorting and searching through data. For instance, quicksort and merge sort and all these things. You'll learn about these in college if you haven't already learned about them, but you have to be an expert at these things. Effective communication skills. This is maybe one that you haven't heard too often. Like you think, oh, as long as I'm a great programmer or a great engineer, that's all that matters. But the best engineers in cybersecurity are those that are able to communicate in an easy to understand way. When I say altitude here, I say communicate clearly in the right altitude. I mean that you have to know who you're talking to. Some people are extremely technical, and in that case, you can talk in very technical terms to them and go in very deep. Other people, maybe an executive at a company, if you're helping them with a security breach, you have to explain things in their language that they can understand, and they're not going to understand bits and bytes and algorithms and so on. And so if you want to be really successful in any computer science career, whether it's cybersecurity or others, effective communications, be able to explain things in a clear way, using the right language for your audience. What, your audience may be less technical than you, is super important. And I would say in my career, rising to the senior most engineer of the largest cybersecurity company, at least 50% of what helped me get to the top was the ability to communicate effectively to people, executives and other people. Super important. Prioritization is also really important. This is a quote actually from one of the former Symantec CEOs. He said, always focus on the critical few rather than the trivial many. It's really important, especially in cybersecurity, to identify what is the most relevant thing that you should be focusing on, because especially in big corporations, major enterprises like, an Apple, Google, a Ford, a General Motors, a Boeing, these corporations are constantly under attack. They literally have thousands of alerts per day that they have to deal with. And if they were to literally try to investigate every one of those alerts, they need a staff of 10,000 people, but they don't have a staff of 10,000 people. They might have a staff of a couple dozen or a couple hundred in some cases. And so it's really important to learn how to focus your time and prioritize your time so that you can focus on the attacks that are really relevant and not focus on the things that are irrelevant. And generally speaking in life, that's a super useful tool. So, we all have things where there's 50 different things we can do in our life, and oftentimes the things that are most fun are the things that are less important. But it's always important, at least or most of the time important, to focus on the things that are really the critical few things that are really going to make a difference, and not do the things that are less important. And in my day, I always have a backlog of tasks I have to do, and I just don't get to most of them because I only do the ones that are most important, and that's okay. Okay, so those are the basics. Those are the basics for any computer science career, but they help with cybersecurity as well. Once you've done those things and thought about those and worked on those, then immerse yourself in different cybersecurity areas. So there's a number of different areas, right? You could build antivirus software, you could build firewall software, you could build intrusion detection software, you could become an incident responder where you investigate attacks and do forensics and figure out how the attacker got in, what did they access, what system settings do they change, do they lower the firewall settings, and how things are, now you're more vulnerable, for instance. There's many different cybersecurity domains, and you have to figure out what's most exciting for you. I went on the path of actually developing cybersecurity software, antivirus software, and intrusion prevention software to block hackers on the network. But that was most of my career. I analyzed computer viruses and figured out how they work. I reverse engineered them to see, to actually see their machine language instructions and figure out, what they did. But other people really enjoy hacking into systems as an ethical hacker. Some people enjoy finding vulnerabilities in software, finding the flaws in software that would have let a hacker get in, but you want to find them proactively. And so you have to figure out which discipline you want to look into. And if you don't know, then look into all of them. Try participating in cybersecurity hackathons. Write your own prototypes. Like, have any of you built an antivirus scanner before? If you haven't, give it a try. It's a really difficult thing. Try to build a piece of software that actually goes and locates a malicious a fake malicious piece of software in your computer. It's an interesting project to do. And in fact, at UCLA, we give projects like this occasionally. Contribute to open source projects. If you haven't heard of ClamAV, ClamAV is an open source antivirus product that anybody can contribute to, and it actually detects lots and lots of malware, millions of different threats. And you can go and look at the source code and see how antivirus software works in C++ and so on, and modify it, improve it, and so on, and contribute to it. If you do contribute to an open source project, it's going to help you get into a cybersecurity company because they're going to say, wow, you have a proven history of working on these things. Cuckoo Sandbox is another open source project, for instance, that maybe some of you have heard of. This is a project where people build a virtual machine system that you can run suspected malware in. So if you have a file and you think it might be bad, you're not sure, you can launch it in Cuckoo Sandbox, and it's a totally isolated environment, so it doesn't actually do any harm. And then you can watch what the malware does, what system calls it makes, what files it accesses, what network communications it does, so you can get an idea of exactly how the attack works. And so this is a really useful tool that people use in order to effectively, it's sort of like entrapment. You put the threat inside and see what it does, and it lets you get an idea of what the threat's going to do to your environment. And again, this is open source. You can see all the source code. you could contribute to it. Also, read cybersecurity research papers and go to conferences. Go to Black Hat, go to DEF CON, read the papers that people are writing. There's lots of interesting papers published by Google, for instance. If you find that when you're reading these cybersecurity papers, if you ever tried, a lot of them are going to be really difficult to understand. That's normal. I have difficulty understanding a lot of the papers because there's a lot of terminology and gobbledygook that people put in research papers. Don't feel dumb. That's normal. I feel the same way. And if you get confused by a research paper, it's probably written poorly. It's probably not you. So, but try to read them, and you'll get better and better at it over time. Okay, and finally, if you want to build security software rather than just use it to hunt for attackers, learn more advanced skills. So this is for a little bit later in your careers, or you could do it now. I mean, I know high school students that do this kind of stuff. Learn machine learning. Play with some, take a course on Coursera or play with TensorFlow or any of the other machine learning toolkits that are available. Learn data science by taking a course at a local junior college or reading some books. Learn how to use big data analytics systems like Hadoop, things like MapReduce and NoSQL systems like Cassandra. These technologies are used extensively in cybersecurity companies today. And if you know these technologies, you'll be able to work on the most interesting things in these companies. Machine learning is at the heart of detecting hacking attacks, malicious software, spyware, ransomware, and so on. So knowing these things would be super useful. And one of the things you can do is when you're in college, for instance, you could go and work as a research assistant to a professor who might help you learn some of these technologies, and then you could apply them to cybersecurity. I talked a lot. Are there any questions so far?
I was just about to ask that question. Professor Nanchenberg, we've got a chat room. I don't know if you noticed that on in your GoToMeeting tools over there.
I did not, but I can go there. Hold on one second.
Chat room, my little bot's here. Does anyone have any questions for Professor Nanchenberg right now?
You can call me Carrie, please. Call me Carrie.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
For Carrie, he's just given you guys a ton of information. Anybody out there?
Let's see here.
I've got a question. Maybe. Oh, I was just going to offer a question. This is Bob, Mr. Bush. One of the things you talked about was contributing to an open source thing. Is that something that is actually like that a high school student can do? And if so, kind of how would they get started?
Anybody can contribute to open source. Now with open source projects are typically controlled by a person or team of people, and that team of people will review all changes. So if you are contributing to an open source project and you try to make a change that will cause the software to have a bug or something, that will be reviewed and probably rejected. But over time, you can learn how to make changes to these projects in a way that'll add value, and anybody can do it. I don't think they care if you're a high school student or anybody else, as long as you have the skills. And how would you go about starting? You can just, I would say, for instance, if you're interested in ClamAV, for instance, and there are many open source cybersecurity projects, but for instance, if you like that, you can go and download all the source code in your computer and start playing with it. You could make changes to the source code locally and try them out, see how they work, see if you can speed up the antivirus software by optimizing it or adding a new feature. And then you could just contact members of the community who are shepherding the project and ask them if they'd be interested in a submission.
So we did have a couple of questions that popped up in the chat room. One specifically about the open source project. Brennan is asking, would you be able to show on a college app that you, specifically if you were trying to apply for a computer science course or computer science school, that you were doing that? Would you recommend that as a proof that you were doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason why you shouldn't put that in a college essay or in a resume or whatever you would send to the college about your activities. One activity you might write is, active contributor to open source project X, where I've improved this open source antivirus software. That would be pretty exciting, and it would be a differentiating point for college admissions, I would think.
Sure. You had another question that said, do you recommend a specific programming language that you would maybe have a beginner start with?
So for beginners, I would recommend Python. I think it's a pretty easy to learn language. There are lots of resources on the internet to play with that. It's much simpler than something like C++ or even Java. So I would say Python would be the best to start with. But frankly, the best programming language is the one that you are most fluent in and that you can program the fastest in with the fewest errors. And so, there are cybersecurity practitioners that use every programming language under the sun. However, if you do want to do development on client software, in other words, software that would run on a personal computer, like you want to write antivirus software, you want to work for McAfee or Symantec or Kaspersky or something, C++ is the best language for that, and assembly language would also be a useful language. If you want to work on big data systems, then languages like Python and Java would be better. C++ as well is not bad.
Okay, along those lines, Leon had said, what are different ways to practice coding after learning the basic languages like Python/C? I think Leon is referring to in our basic intro computer science class. We program in Python for the second semester, and we use an online program called Replit. Leon, is that where you're asking, like, where you would try and do that with the coding, or if you would download like a NetBeans type of thing? I don't know. Maybe you could be more specific.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a couple answers to this, and if Leon wants to ask specifically, I'm happy to turn over the floor to him. Leon, do you have a question, or you want me to just answer generically? Okay, why don't I just go and answer generically, and if Leon wants to jump in, he can. So how do you practice coding? There's a number of different ways. The best way, the way that I did it when I was young, when I was your age, is I just started writing projects. So I picked a project. I said, I'm going to build a video game, a space shooter video game. And I just sat down and I learned everything I needed to learn in order to do that. Today, there's lots of resources on the internet. There wasn't when I started, but there is now. And just try it. And you're going to fail the first 5 times, and you'll think you can never do it. At least that's the way I felt. And after the 6th time, you try something and it's going to start working, and then you'll make it a little bit better and a little bit better. And again, the best project to work on is the one that is most exciting to you. It doesn't matter what you do. Any programming that you're doing where you're learning something new and building your skills and learning what mistakes not to make because you find a bug and then you say, wait, I'm never going to make that mistake again. Anything you do is going to help you. The other thing you can do, instead of just coming up with your own projects, is use websites like LeetCode, LeetCode, LeetCode.com, and there are lots of them. And these websites have programming assignments, but effectively, 20-minute to 30-minute assignments that you can try to do that are very much like job interviews that you might have, or for internships or full-time jobs. And so you can become very, very fast at programming if you just do lots of these problems. They're not as exciting as doing your own video game project, but they're a way to practice the basic data structures and algorithms and get very, very good. So those would be the 2 ways I would suggest programming. One final point on that. People often, and I'm the same way, often take weeks or months to try to find out the perfect project. What do I want to work on? What should I code? And the answer is the right thing to code is the thing you can come up with in about a half an hour. If you take more than a day to figure out what to program, you're just wasting time because there's no perfect project to work on. So the best project is one that you're actually going to start programming on today. So just start coding. Don't look for the perfect project because that'll just waste your time. Okay. Let's try. How about this one? What is the best coding language to use or learn going into the future for computer science in college? So that really depends on the college. Different universities use different languages. UCLA, for instance, we use C++ as our introductory language. I think UC Berkeley uses Java. Different schools use different languages. If you're really concerned about which particular college, I would say look into that college because you can find very easily on the internet what languages they teach. But generally speaking, once you get good in one language like Java or C++, it's pretty easy to switch to others. So I wouldn't worry so much about learning a particular language. I would worry about programming a lot and in any language, and then you can learn the other languages pretty easily. All right. Let's see what else we have here. Would Python be used more or Java? That depends on the company, the project. I can tell you at Google, they use both. It just depends on what project you're working on. Python tends to be used more for scripting. Java tends to be used more for really, big picture, sort of large scale applications. So it depends whether you want to do things like machine learning, where you might be using more scripting, would be Python. More backend services would be Java or C++. And I don't know, there's a question here, what would the USACO be a good way to learn? I don't know what USACO is. Can anybody help me there?
This is an online a high school computer competition. So I'm assuming yes, you're going to say yes to that one.
Oh, absolutely. The more programming competitions, programming projects, programming challenges that you can do, the better. It doesn't matter what it is. As long as you're coding, that's what matters. So just think every day that you're not coding is a day you could be coding. And, the more you code, the better you're going to get at it, the faster you're going to be, the bigger salary you're going to make, and the more fun you're going to have. Let's see here. We have another question. It is coming up with the most efficient code to compute something. Perfect. Yeah, that's a great thing to do. Absolutely, Brennan. Absolutely.
Carrie,
okay.
Can you maybe talk about a little bit about UCLA's program specifically and what you guys have as far as CS and your expectations of incoming freshmen?
So sure, I'm happy to talk a little bit about UCLA. And to be perfectly honest, though, I am a volunteer, and so I'm not, extremely knowledgeable about the department and what they're looking for in admissions and so on. So I'll just say that. I can't tell you sort of what a UCLA admissions officer is looking for in a resume, other than a good GPA and a diverse set of activities that you're participating in. But what I can tell you about our computer science program is, like I said, we start off with C++ as a primary language we use in computer science. You'll also learn many other languages like Java and Python throughout your career at UCLA, but we start with the C++ language. It is a very theoretic department. The department is not as practical as other departments, for instance, like Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So if you're looking and you want to be more of an engineer's engineer and really focus on the programming aspect of things, a Cal Poly is probably a better choice. If you're more interested in really understanding the computer science theory that underlies, all of the software that's being built, how to analyze software, make sure it's as efficient as possible, really understanding things like machine learning from a fundamental theoretical perspective. That's, UCLA is definitely more of a theoretical focus than less practical, more theoretical. But you will get a fair amount of programming in your courses at UCLA. I would say no matter what university you go to, you should definitely program outside of class, because it's never enough coding inside of class to make you excellent. And if you want to really have a good time in the software industry, you have to really be excellent. Other things about UCLA, they have experts in cryptography, experts now in machine learning. They're hiring a number of people in machine learning. Obviously in computer networking, the internet was created by people at UCLA. UCLA does not have a cybersecurity program, really. So that's, if you are looking for cybersecurity, there are other schools that might be a little bit better for you. But there are cybersecurity courses. It's just not a dedicated program at UCLA.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
There was another couple of questions. Okay, wait, here comes a perspective brewing for you. Where would you be able to code outside of class? What kind of opportunities does UCLA offer, or where can you find opportunities elsewhere?
I see. Great question. So, coding outside of class, there's two answers. First answer is you don't need anybody else to code outside of class. You can download a compiler for free, like Visual Studio Student Edition, Python, and just start coding yourself. Build video games. You don't need anybody to do that with you. If you are somebody who enjoys working with other people, UCLA, for example, has a number of different programs, things like MicroMouse, where you can work with other students, other engineering students, to build robots, for example, that have to navigate a maze. That's what MicroMouse is. It's a robot that a bunch of electrical engineers and mechanical engineers build from scratch. You build the software as a computer science person, and together you actually build a robot that can autonomously, on its own, navigate through a maze. There are lots of projects like that at UCLA. There's, automotive projects that are run by the mechanical engineering department. They need software people. So there's lots of different programming teams at UCLA that you can just become part of. And people are very welcoming. So you don't have to worry about it if you're just a beginner. They'll take you in and they'll teach you. So that would be lots of different things that, that you can do. There's also hackathons again, as well as that you can do.
So let's steer our discussion, I guess, back to cybersecurity, because this group of people, we do. I know Bill explained to you that we do the Cyber Patriots, which is that national competition, and we did have a question. I'm sorry, the background noise here. We're headed to bath time right now. From your experience with cybersecurity, where is the biggest risk right now?
That's an open-ended question. It depends on who you are. If you're a corporation that's protecting sensitive information for your users, there's a different set of risks than if you're a home user. So are we talking about home users? Are we talking about big corporations, governments? There's no one answer to this. The attackers are going after all of the above.
I was going to say, Mr. Bush, do you want to jump on that question there?
Yeah, what's the question there?
Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting. I guess what I was trying to get at is, we talk a lot about in Cyber Patriots about the coming threats, it's a dangerous world out there, and there's a lot to be afraid of. And I guess since you're sort of directly involved in it, I was just wondering from your perspective where you think the biggest threats are, or where maybe not just so much as an individual, but as as a country or whatever. What do you think we should be worrying about?
Got it. Okay. Well, if you're looking forward, I would say the biggest threats are going to come from what do we call IoT devices, Internet of Things, IoT. IoT devices are devices like a toaster that's connected to the internet, or your refrigerator, or light bulbs that you can turn on via a Wi-Fi network. Video cameras that are connected to the internet, for instance, and streaming video up to the cloud where you can view it, view your home when you're away from home. These devices are built on hundreds or thousands of different platforms. They're not built on Windows. They're not necessarily built on, a typical flavor of Linux. They're built on all kinds of different platforms, and they are not properly secured in most cases because people who are building light bulbs know how to build light bulbs. They don't know how to build secure software. So every time you're adding software to a light bulb or a refrigerator or a video camera, you're potentially exposing that device to risk. Now you might think, who cares if my light bulb gets compromised by a hacker, which is it's a sort of a reasonable thing to say. But if a hacker can get access to your light bulb and get software running on your light bulb, which it will have a microprocessor if it doesn't already in many light bulbs, that hacker can use that light bulb to launch what are called distributed denial of service attacks. A distributed denial of service attack is an attack where 1,000, 1 million, or 10 million devices that are controlled by an attacker all send network traffic to a victim a computer network, let's say a big bank or a website, in order to shut down that website because the website gets so much network traffic from so many different devices at the same time, it just can't keep up. Imagine if you had 100 million or 1 billion light bulbs, video cameras, and so on, that all happen to be controlled by an attacker and then all connected to a bank or a particular website at the same time in order to basically deny access to other people because there's so much traffic. It's just a flood of network communications. That has happened in the past, and it will continue to get worse because there are going to be more and more of these devices that are insecure and unsecured. So if I would look at for anything, I would say that's going to be a big. People are going to be commit blackmail and extortion and say, look, if you don't pay us $1 million, we're going to take down your bank tomorrow, and they can do it. So it's something that's going to be a bigger problem.
Thank you for that answer. We have talked about several of the things that you just mentioned with the Cyber Patriots. So it's good to hear you echoing some of the things we've already talked about, and that that, also good to know from your perspective, where's the really scary thing up ahead of us?
Yeah, I would say that's the biggest thing. I mean, computer systems are actually getting more secure over time. Windows and Mac computers are getting more secure. iPhones are secure. Android devices are more secure. So while computers are getting more secure, these Internet of Things devices are getting less secure, and there are more of them. And so there's going to be a shift in the threat landscape probably, and that happens over time. The threats actually shift over time. They don't always stay the same.
Very interesting that you guys are talking about that right now, because a couple days ago, my 6-year-old son, decided that our family needed a Nest in our house. And thinking
Right.
about all of our Cyber Patriot stuff that we've been talking about lately, I said 100% no. I do not want some random person to try and hack into my house by my Nest. Thank you very much.
Well, now, of course, Nest is built by Google, and I have to say Nest is very secure because that's something that Google takes very seriously. But a lot of devices are not, and so just it is worthwhile to consider that. But I have to say, in defense of that team, their software is very secure. So I wouldn't worry too much about a Nest. But any other brand, you might want to worry about a lot.
Thank you.
No problem. No problem.
There were a couple other questions that popped up while we were talking about that stuff. Daniel said, do you know CompTIA certification? Is it worth getting it?
So I don't know that certification. That's a new one. There are definitely certifications, CISSP and others. It's CISSP. I didn't say it well. I would say if you want to be a practitioner, in other words, you want to go work for a big company like a Ford or a General Motors or a Bank of America, having a certification will help you get a job as a cybersecurity practitioner. However, if you want to build cybersecurity software, it's really less important to have a certification. What's far more important is just being a great programmer that knows your data structures and algorithms and has really good coding fluency. You don't write a lot of bugs in your code. You just program a lot. So I don't have any certifications whatsoever, and it hasn't hurt me at all. But if you, again, want to work as somebody who uses cybersecurity tools and monitors networks for attacks, yeah, certifications are important.
Great, thank you. Anything else, you guys?
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. CISSP is one of CompTIA's certifications. Well, there you go. There you go. I wasn't familiar.
Anybody else have any other questions for Carrie while we have him? Thank you, and thank you very much. Is there a difference between CS and IT?
Okay. And by the way, I have some other topics that I could talk about if people are interested. I'm happy to go to that slide in a second, and we can, if people like, or I can keep answering questions. I'm happy to do whatever. Okay. Is there a difference between in studying CS and IT? Yeah, there is. When people think about IT, information technology, they're primarily thinking about a job where you're managing computers, you're installing software, you're setting up networks, configuring networks. It's different than actually building the software that runs on those computers, and that's what computer science would be about. So if you are more excited about administering networks, setting up computers, configuring them, installing software on them, changing the settings, updating the software, that would be what a typical IT person would do. If you're more interested in building the software that runs on those computers or scans those computers for threats, that's what more of a computer science person would do. Okay, how about, let's go switch here. Hopefully I'm still sharing my screen here. 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Hold on, that's the wrong one. I take it back. 1 second. That's not what we want to share. All right, let's see, application window. Here we go. Okay, so where is we were just on the Google Slides. Let me go back to that here. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, I would be very happy to talk about any of the following. Tell me if anybody has any sort of interest in any of these, and I am happy to share them. Maybe, Julie, you can read the group chat and tell me if anybody brings anything up. I'll just project the slide here.
Yeah, I know there's been a lot of conversations just in general of what is it like to be a CS person in a job atmosphere. We have several students who've had internships and some that are realizing that a desk job is really not something that they want to do. maybe you can talk about working at Google X and Alphabet.
Sure. Well, Google X is different than most other companies. It's really a unique beast. There's not many companies like it. So I'll talk about what it's like to work at a regular software company, and then I can talk a little bit about Google X because it's different than most other companies. Look, programming, building computer software has its ups and downs. If you enjoy programming, there's nothing better than being in a software job. But being in a software job means debugging software. You're going to have to not just build new software, but oftentimes you're going to have to find the bugs in your software and other people's software. You're going to have to, generally speaking, when you first start in the software industry, you're not going to be building stuff from scratch, building your own projects from scratch. You're going to be working on other people's software that they already built, debugging and improving their code. So that a lot of people don't like that because when you're writing, you like to write your own software from scratch. That's a lot more fun. The reality is when you start a job in software engineering or computer science, you're going to probably be fixing other people's bugs and adding little features here and there. As you get better and better, you'll then begin designing and building your own software. During a typical day, you might end up programming between 5 and 6 hours. You might spend 2 to 3 hours in meetings or doing email or doing other things. A lot of time is spent doing design work. So you don't just, generally speaking, you don't just go and write some code. For instance, at Google, we do design documents and design sketches where we, design out what we want to build first and we get feedback on it before we build it. Whereas you might be accustomed to just sort of writing code right now, when you're working on a project that requires, 10,000, 100,000 lines of code, you want to think about it first before you just start writing some code. Although occasionally we will just jump in as well. So, being in the software industry is definitely, it's not as much fun as writing your own projects from scratch and doing your own thing, because you will have to work on things that are less exciting, like configuring scripts or configuring software, finding other people's bugs, making small enhancements, these kinds of things. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that being in the software industry, in many cases, especially if you work for some of the bigger software companies like Google and Facebook and so on, is wild. It's crazy. There's a lot of perks. You get free food. You get free parties. There's all parties all the time. There's trips. You go to movies together. When you get a little bit older, they'll have a beer party at the end of the day. And so, for instance, my team has beer every 2 weeks. We all sit around and enjoy a beer together. So there's a lot of perks that I never had when I first started in the software industry. It's amazing all the different things that they do. Google X recently, a couple of years ago, took the entire company on a camping trip together. They all went camping in tents. So there's a lot of wonderful things that you do that are really fun. You meet really smart people, and it's generally a lot of fun. But it is a desk job. You are going to spend a lot of time at your desk and a lot of time in meetings. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, because you see the beautiful side of these companies and how fun it is and everything, but at the same time, we have to remember that those parties and fun things come on the end of hours and hours and hours of being dialed in. So
yeah, and that's absolutely true. You're going to be sitting at your desk for hours, 30 hours to 40 hours a week of programming and 10 hours a week of other things. Some people work far more hours than that. I would say it depends on the company you work for. I tend to work a 40-hour work week. And that is acceptable. If you prioritize the critical few over the trivial many, and you get the most important things done, you can work a 40-hour week and be very productive and get promoted and do just fine and make a lot of money. If you are somebody who does not like working 60-hour weeks, then try to find a company that that has an ethic of working a 40-hour work week, because a lot of companies will work their employees to the bone. I've heard, for instance, I have friends that work at SpaceX, and those friends often work 60 to 80 hours a week. They really want to be there because it's really exciting, but boy, it's really a lot of work, and people do burn out. So you have to be very careful when you work for some of these companies.
I'm going to circle back to a question that was thrown up there that I forgot to ask you before we jumped to this slide was, Are there specific websites or resources that you like to refer to for help or information, or were there anything that you specifically used that would be helpful to beginner cybersecurity people?
You know, for cybersecurity, there's lots of good resources on the SANS Institute, S-A-N-S, SANS Institute. They have lots of write-ups that are generally easy to read and pretty good. There's lots of good videos on YouTube, and there's lots of bad videos on YouTube, so you just have to be careful with that. If anybody is interested, I do have a video on the Stuxnet virus, which I gave a couple of years ago, and you can just search for Stuxnet and Natchenberg on YouTube. And that's a reasonable introduction. There's, again, many introductions on YouTube that you can watch. I honestly don't read or look at a lot of these websites because I don't spend time on the introductory things anymore, and so I'm not really a great person to share that with you, unfortunately. But those would be some ideas. SANS Institute and YouTube would be a couple good places to start.
Okay. Another question that came through is, do you follow any blogs or podcasts or anything specifically that you would recommend out there? We've been kind of looking and listening at a couple of different podcasts ourselves, but just was curious what your preference was.
The only website that I occasionally go to would be Dark Reading. Dark Reading is a cybersecurity-focused website. Has lots of great articles about cybersecurity and different attacks and so on. I am right now nose to the grindstone on building the software, and so I have not been focusing on attacks specifically. It's sort of an interesting thing. When you build cybersecurity software, you don't, in many cases, have to understand the specific attacks that are going around. If you understand the generic, sort of how attacks work generically in general, you actually want to be more general when you build cybersecurity software, because you don't want to tailor your software to any particular attack. You want it to work for many different types of attacks. And so often it doesn't actually help to go and be up to date on every single last threat that comes out, every new virus or spyware attack. And so, frankly, I don't have time to invest in that often. So I only visit rarely.
Another question is, what's the difference between an education in cybersecurity and one in computer science in terms of majors? Leon, I think he actually answered that earlier, because with just saying comp sci is more the software building, whereas cybersecurity would be out doing something else. I don't know. Maybe, Carrie, you can answer that a little bit better.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple answers to that. If you want to build cybersecurity software like firewalls, antivirus software, intrusion detection systems, and so on, then you need to have a basic foundation in computer science, which means you want to get a computer science degree from a school like UCLA, UC Berkeley, Stanford, wherever you can go. Cal Poly San Luis Obispo would be a great school, and so on. Okay. Once you have the basics in computer science, you would then learn about cybersecurity, and you would use what you've learned, the data structures and algorithms you've learned, to build cybersecurity software. If you want to operate cybersecurity software, in other words, you don't want to build the software, you want to use software that Symantec builds or McAfee builds to track hunters down, to hunt the hackers down, then having a degree in computer science is less relevant, although it's still useful. In that case, you really want to go and get internships, working in a IT security department for a big company, and learn how to use the tools. And it's more about using the tools rather than building the tools. It's a little bit different.
All right. Well, we have about 5 more minutes left in our chat for this tonight. Oh, here we go. Here's another question. How do hackers, quote unquote, attack devices through network connections, and how do you track them?
Okay. Well, that is a difficult question to answer, but I'll try to answer it given the time we have. So typically, when you on your computer connect to another computer over the internet, there is software on that other computer that's running. Okay, and that software is waiting for your connection. And once you connect to that computer, your computer sends over data to that other computer. Okay. that other computer, its software that's running, maybe it's light bulb software that you're sending a command to turn on the light bulb or turn off the light bulb or whatever it happens to be, that software is expecting a certain set of data to be sent over. It might expect that you send over a command of either turn on or turn off, like turn the light bulb on or turn light bulb off, or maybe it expects a command like change color to red or blue or green, right? And if the software that controls that light bulb is not properly written and you send it a command that is not one of the commands it expects, like for instance, you send it a command which is, instead of the words turn on, turn off, or change color to red, blue, or green, you send it a command which is 1,000 characters long, 1,000 letters long, that can potentially trick the software into either crashing or running your commands that you send over as an attacker. And it's beyond the scope of this discussion. It's, I could always give a talk later, but effectively what you can do is by sending a command that the receiving computer is not expecting, you can actually trick that computer into running instructions that you, the attacker, want it to run. Once your instructions are running on that computer, on that device, that light bulb, those instructions can then introduce additional malicious software, download it off the internet from a website, and then take a foothold in that device where you now have control of the device. So it's almost like going to a business. You walk up to the window and you trick the person behind the counter to to let you in the back room and take control over the back room, is basically what's happening. And it's actually really easy to do that to many software packages if they're not properly secured.
That really was a very easy, succinct explanation. Thank you. And our last question before we get out of here is, do you recommend getting a formal education/degree in cybersecurity specifically, or after a computer science degree, or no?
If you can find a good undergraduate program that focuses on cybersecurity and computer science, I think that would be fantastic. If it's that there's nothing wrong with that. Another way to go would be to get a degree from a typical university in computer science, like a UCLA or Berkeley or something, and then go and do a master's degree at a program like, let's say, a Carnegie Mellon or something, where they focus on cybersecurity. If you did that, you would have the best of both worlds, because you'd have the computer science background, the basics, the data structures and algorithms, and you'd have a master's degree, which any cybersecurity company would look at and drool over, because they would say, wow, this person is focused on this in their master's. They've taken a number of courses on this, and they're really experts. If you really want to get into cybersecurity, I would say the latter option of doing an undergrad in computer science and a master's in cybersecurity would be the best way to go.
Awesome. Well, Carrie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. We really appreciate the fact that you've gone way over your 30 minutes that you said you had for us, and we just really appreciate the time that you've given. Guys, can we say a quick thank you in our chat room to Carrie for his help and just these great, amazing conversations that we've been having. So we really do appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully you'll come to UCLA. If you do, look me up. I teach every winter quarter. That's when I teach, and maybe you can take my course.
Awesome. Well, Carrie, I'll be in touch soon, but guys, go get some studying done. I know some of us have AP Bio and Calc tomorrow, so go get that finished. And happy spring break to all of you. Don't forget your images. Oh, last thing before you go. If you are interested in joining a hackathon league, I need to know by tomorrow if you would like to do that. Yes.
Oh,
Ashley.
One final thing, by the way.
Yes.
So if people are interested in cybersecurity, which sounds like all of you are, I wrote a novel, which is actually a cybersecurity thriller, and young people I think would enjoy it. It's called The Florentine Deception, and so maybe you could send out information on that. It's called The Florentine Deception, and it's actually a cybersecurity thriller. So anyway, people might enjoy it, and I have to pitch it because otherwise I would hate myself.
Absolutely, we will take a look at that. Thank you for offering that up. But yeah, I will send out more information on NCL, which is what Ashley is posting in the chat room. But if anyone is interested, we need teams of up from 2 people to 5 people. It is a 2-month type of competition, and And yeah. Oh, last question for you, Carrie, is what course do you teach at UCLA? What was the number again? I think you said it. Oh, he took off. Arin, I will find that out for you and I will let you know. Oh, Bill's got it for you. CS32. There you go. There you go. All right, you guys. Good night. Thank you very much. And I will see most of you guys tomorrow.